Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Decaf and Devos podcast. I am your host, Aduré, and if you want to know more about me, just go and listen to the last episode. I talked way too much about myself in that last episode, which I guess was the point, but you'll just never hear me talk that much about myself ever again. Well, I guess that was a lie. Today we're talking about my testimony, so this will probably be the most you ever hear me talk about myself. But starting next week, we'll get more into the regular rhythm of what the D&D episodes will start to look like. So get ready. Fasten your seatbelts. You're in for a treat. I have to also be honest with you guys. I didn't prep a single thing for this episode. I honestly don't think I'll ever prep for these. I just want them to be very raw and organic and just kind of like whatever's on my heart at the time. But for a testimony video, you probably should prep for that because there's just so many details. And I know I'm only 26, but I feel like I've lived like 10 lives in these past almost 3 decades. So I actually was just telling my friend the other day about just some things I went through in the past, and she was so shocked. She was like, Aduré, you're just so happy-go-lucky. I never would have known that you went through all those things. So hey, don't judge a book by its cover. But before we even get started, let me go ahead and put my phone on D&D. You know it's that time. For those watching the YouTube, that is so blurry, but phone's on D&D. And Joyce, the drink of choice today is my chai latte. We love it. It's literally my favorite drink. All right, let's get going. So, as you guys know in the last episode, I was raised in Texas, born in Oklahoma, but raised in McKinney, Texas. We called it Mactown. I loved that city. I loved those people. I love everything about it. I think that's a great place to raise your family, honestly. And well, I guess I should really start with my parents because my parents were the ones that migrated here from Nigeria. My mom was in her 20s. My dad, I want to say was in his early 30s. I don't think he was in his 20s at that point. Which again, is just like, I can't believe they did that. I'm glad they did that, but I just have so much respect for them for doing that. And so my mom was a deacon, but eventually she got ordained and became a pastor. So every day was church for us. It was Sundays. It was Sunday nights. It was Tuesday nights. It was Wednesday nights. It was Friday nights. It was just all the time. Saturdays, sometimes she would take us to church. It was just all the time. And then even at home, we would have like prayer nights and just a lot of worship in our home. It was just a very, very, very godly home, which I'm grateful I was raised in that type of environment because if I ever needed prayer, like I knew my mom was my go-to person. So I think for me, I actually had my friend ask me this the other day. She was like, how has your walk with God changed from when you were a child to now being, in your mid-20s? And I think that's such a great question. And we'll probably talk a lot about that in this episode because when I think back on my childhood, I think I was just such an emotional wreck. Like I just didn't know how to deal with my emotions. And I feel like I got rebuked a lot for my emotions because no one else really knew how to deal with them. So instead of people teaching me how to deal with them, I just was kind of told to not have them, So I was just like, when I think about being a kid, I was so emotional. I was constantly crying. I think I talked about this in the last episode, but I just felt like such a black sheep. So I just always felt misunderstood. Like I didn't know. And I think it frustrated me because I didn't know how to say, like, I didn't know how to get people to understand what I was feeling. So it would just make me cry. So that is kind of just to get you a good understanding about like the type of child I was. I was either very, very happy or I was very, very sad, but I wasn't really anything, like I didn't really feel any other emotions. But I think this put a big strain on my relationship with my mom because I just wanted her so badly to understand me, but I don't think she just couldn't. And it's not her fault. I think every teenage girl understands this too. And I think she just cared so much about the church that I felt like my emotions didn't really matter. And I mean, when I think about growing up, I was just constantly told, like, you're going to wear this regardless. Like, if it's itchy, if it's uncomfortable, it doesn't matter. You're wearing it. Even on the days where I was like, Mom, I don't feel good, or like I feel sick, or I just like don't want to go to church, I was still forced out of my bed and I still went to church. So I think in some ways it was good because it taught me the discipline of like, hey, every Sunday, even though it's one of the 2 days that you're off of, work or school, whatever it is, you are going to be in church because it's showing the Lord that this is what you care about. This is where your heart's at. And so I think in some ways it was actually good for me to build that discipline of, hey, no matter what, Sunday morning, we're going to church. But I think there are moments where I almost wish I was talked through my emotions as opposed to like just being told to ignore my emotions and just get up and walk out the door, you know? But I do think it's also a cultural thing because I think that was also something I really struggled with as a kid. I was raised in a Nigerian home, but my school and my society was American. So I would go to school and I would, you know, just hear my friends being raised in a very different way. And so I think that was just a really hard thing to deal with as well. But by the time I got to my high school years, I don't want to say I was starting to like lash out or like be rebellious. I think I felt like I was forced to like neglect my emotions for so long. So by the time I got to my senior year, I was just like, you know what, I'm doing what I want and I'm about to go to college anyway. So it's just that time. And actually my parents, this was probably like, this was probably maybe like 3 or 4 weeks before my senior year of high school. And my parents had like this really, really bad separation. Never got divorced, never legally divorced. Nigerians don't really believe in that, but it might as well have been. And I was forced. My mom doesn't remember this, which I think is so interesting. But it marked me so much as a kid. She like forced me and my younger siblings to move with her. And so my dad was like left alone in the house. And mind you, like it was my senior year. Like all my friends were in my high school. Like I did not want to change schools. So my mom ended up moving to Greenville with me and my younger siblings. And I was still going to school in McKinney, which was like 45 minutes away. So it was so hard. Again, we didn't know how to process our emotions, I think really as an entire family. So I just never really knew what to do with like all my built up sadness and anger. And I think it just started coming out in ways that I didn't really expect. Like, I think I was just not the nicest to my little sister, which is so sad. I mean, we're so close now, but looking back, I'm like, oh, she was just such a cute little kid. And I was just not the nicest to her, but I was just processing so many things. And I ended up like wrecking my pastor's car. Like I literally called my senior year of high school my dark ages because I just feel like I blacked out for the entire year. I don't even know who I was at that time, but I was just not the nicest to my mom and my sister. And I think it's because I blame my mom for a lot of things at that time. And it wasn't her fault either. Like she was also dealing with a lot and also had emotions that needed to be cared for as well. So anyway, looking back, I'm like, man, I just wish I had more compassion for her. But at the time, you know, when you're a teenage girl, you just feel like your mom's like ruining your life. But like she wasn't. She was just trying to figure it out as well. So anyway, by the time I get to college, I was so determined, you guys, to not follow the Lord anymore. Like I was just like, hey, by the time I get to college, Sundays are going to be my day. I'm going to do whatever I want with my Sundays. I'm not following the Lord anymore. Blah, 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 blah. And God was probably looking at me like, she has no idea. She has no idea what's about to happen. But I wanted to go to the University of Texas, UT, in Austin. But my dad, I was a big daddy's girl. I mean, obsessed with that guy still to this day. He would like always take me to my choir concerts, my lacrosse games. Like I just could do no wrong in his eyes and he could do no wrong in my eyes. Like he was just like my hero. So we were super, super close when I was a kid and still close now. But yeah, I remember my dad being like, you know, you're either going to community college or you're going to Texas Tech, because my brother was already at Texas Tech. And I think it was like a protective thing for him. He just felt better knowing that I would be in the same college town as my brother. So I was like, okay, well, community college doesn't really feel like an option right now because I think I do need to get away from home. So I guess I'm going to Texas Tech, which I really did not want to do, but I was just excited to get out of the house. I was like, honestly, send me anywhere. And so I went to Tech, and I have to say Texas Tech was probably like the worst 4 years of my life, but also simultaneously such a crucial 4 years of my life. Like I can't imagine not going to tech because so many of my close friends came from that season. But at the same time, I'm like, it really was not great for me. So let me break this down. So freshman year, I'm going into college thinking to myself, I'm not going to follow God. My brother is like, hey, just come to church with me one time and I won't ask you again. And his church just happened to be like down the street from where I was going to school. So I was like, okay, sure, whatever. Went to church with him. Loved that church. I think it was more the people at the time. Like I loved all the mentors that were there and all the leaders. Like there was such a strong spirit of discipleship at that church, which I loved at that time. So I was like, wait, I kind of want to come back here every week. And everyone here is so sweet and nice. And so that's what I did. And I would go back every week, really just because I made friends and I wanted to keep, talking to those friends and, making those friends. So that's kind of how I started getting plugged into the church. And then every now and then I would try other churches with some other friends or my dorm mates or, just people that would kind of come along my journey. So I somehow went from like church is now an obligation when I was a kid to now as a teenager in college being like, wait, church is actually so fun. And it's not a place where I just have to serve. Like when I was growing up, I was just always told like you will serve. If it's in the choir, if it's being an usher or leading the children, like you're going to serve in some capacity. But there wasn't as much of an emphasis on like making sure I was receiving anything. And so I guess I just always saw church as an obligation. But when I went to college, I was like, wait, this is so fun. I'm learning so much about the Bible and God is actually so cool. Like, why did I didn't know this about him, And my brother at one point, he was the intern at the church that I was at the time. And it was him and the girl intern, the pastor of the church at the time, or like the college ministry. And I think 2 other people from this team. It's like 5 of them. And they were all going to Passion Conference in January. And I had never heard of Passion, never heard of this conference, didn't really care to go. But my brother called me when I was in my dorm and he was like, hey, so the pastor, he's moving to Canada. And so we have this extra ticket. If you're interested, since you're my sister, you get first dibs. We'd love to have you. And I was like, Toby, what is Passion Conference? And he was like, oh, it's just a conference where, we just read the Bible and there's worship and, just a Christian conference. And again, coming from, just a very religious background, I was like, Toby, that does not sound fun at all. Like, why would I want to do that? Like, be so for real right now. No, thank you. And he was like, okay, well, if you change your mind, it's going to be in Atlanta. So just let me know if you ever end up wanting to go. And I stopped him right there. I said, oh, brother, you should have started with the fact that it was in Atlanta. Because if you guys remember from the last episode, the only thing I knew for sure in my life was that I was going to move out of Texas. I didn't know how and I didn't know when and I didn't know where. But I just knew, like, I always had this, like, just innate desire to travel. And so I was like, oh my gosh, Toby, you should have started with that. I will absolutely go. I would be honored. Yeah, praise the Lord. Let's hop in the car. Let's go. And so we ended up driving. I think it was like a 13-hour drive, maybe longer at the time. And I had no idea what this was. I didn't even think to look into it. I just literally hopped in the car and went to this conference and I was blown away. This was probably 2017. I think at that year it was in the Georgia Dome, which doesn't exist anymore. But we like pulled up to the Georgia Dome. I remember being so shocked that there are so many people my age that were interested in like following God. Because again, like I just was always known as like the Jesus freak growing up. I was just always at church. It didn't seem like a normal thing to love God. And so I was blown away by how many kids my age like actually loved to worship the Lord. And so that already like took my breath away. And then on top of that, the worship music was amazing. The sermons were amazing. Again, like I just had never seen church as a way for me to get filled up. So it was like I just felt like I learned so much. And that was the last year that they had something called community groups where you would have like these sessions in between the sermons where you would go to like these different rooms in the in the Georgia Dome, and they would make you sit in these groups, and they would assign you randomly. And so I ended up randomly sitting next to this girl who I looked down, and she just happened to have a Texas Tech phone case. And I was like, oh my gosh, you go to Tech. And she actually was a year younger than me at the time. So she was about to go to Tech. She was a senior in high school. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, I'm at Tech right now. You should like come, if you ever want to come visit, let me know. Here's my number. I had no idea at the time that that girl would end up being one of my closest friends. Shout out to Kira if she's watching this or listening to this. I went to her wedding like right before I moved to Atlanta. She just had a baby. She just came to visit me when she was pregnant. Like, seriously, one of my closest friends. And it all started because she just randomly sat next to me and just happened to have a Texas Tech phone case. I'll never forget that. So after that, I was so excited to be here that I was telling my brother, I was like, I have to come back next year. And I remember they were passing out these Passion Bibles, and they were engraved with the words Georgia Dome on the back, or I think it said Georgia Dome 2017, something like that. And it was like they were giving them away like to an entire section. And I remember praying to God so hard. I was like, God, if I'm meant to be here, I pray that I get one of those Bibles. And I think the winner was like section 317, and we were in 217 or something like that. So I was like, dang, so close yet so far. But I was still so excited to be there. I was like, I still believe I was meant to be here, and I'm still going to come back next year. And then at the end of the conference, they were like, just kidding. Everyone's getting a Bible. So we all went home with free Jesus Bibles, and it was seriously such a fun time. I cannot stress that enough. That conference literally changed my walk with the Lord. I really feel like that's probably where I ended up giving my life back to the Lord and rededicating it. And I did exactly what I said I would do. Every year I went back to Passion Conference. So sophomore year comes around, and again, my parents are still like struggling a lot, and there's just a lot of chaos. And it came to a point where they just couldn't decide on who was going to pay my tuition. And my brothers told me that this happened with them as well. Like, it was just a constant every time the payment came around, like, you know, who's going to pay? My mom's telling me to talk to my dad. My dad's telling me to talk to my mom. I'm like, okay, well, someone's got to pay this. How is this happening? And my second semester of my sophomore year, they just like couldn't figure it out for whatever reason. And so I ended up having to drop out of college, which was detrimental to me as a teenager. I mean, even looking back, like I still see it as a big thing now, but back then it was like the world was ending. Do you hear me? I was like, I can't show my face. Like, I have to hide. I have to go into hiding. This is not real. And I ended up staying in my college town that year. And I think that was my decision, because I think it was still in my mind. I was like, I know I can't be around my friends, but at least I can. Or I know I can't be in school, but at least I can still be around my friends. So, yeah, I think at the time I was like, maybe this is best for me. But looking back, I'm like, I actually maybe wish I didn't do that. But I also get why I didn't want to go home, because there, again, was just so much going on. And I get it. I mean, my dad ended up losing his job. There was just like so much chaos at home. So I think it was actually good for me to stay in my college town. But I mean, I was a wreck. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I lost my identity. I didn't realize that I was putting my identity in my school, but I definitely was. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I think I ended up just like leading a Bible study just to like fill my time. But it ended up being so good for me, because it really was just refining my love for the Lord and for scripture. And so many crazy things happened that year. I got hit by a car, went through a heartbreak. It was rough. Sophomore year, Aduré was having a rough time. And so then junior year, I am determined, you guys. I'm going to graduate on time. I don't care how. I don't care how many classes I have to take. I'm going to do it. And that semester, I went so hard, probably too hard. I took, I think, like 23 hours, which is kind of insane, but I did it. And there were definitely so many sacrifices that had to be made. But I remember I came home that Christmas and our house is gone. Like, I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened. I don't know when it happened. All I know is when my parents are calling me saying, or, you know, when I'm calling them really saying like, hey, I'm coming home, they're telling me, great, here's the new address, because like we don't have a home anymore. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what happened to our house? And so long story short, we lost the house, and like literally what else could have been going wrong at that time? But I think, again, going back to the fact that I just felt like such a black sheep, I did not feel like I mattered to my family, which is so crazy looking back. Because, I mean, I'm so close with them now, but at the time, I just didn't feel like I was valued. I didn't feel like they cared about my opinion. Like, I did not feel like I was a part of this family, really. And I think the fact that I came home for Christmas and the house was gone and no one thought to tell me, I think that just kind of solidified how I felt. I'm like, what do you mean? No one thought to tell me that our house was gone. Like, what are you talking about? And so I think at that time I was building up a lot of resentment that I didn't even realize I was building. And I just had so many questions, and it just kind of constantly kept getting like brushed under the rug or, you know, passed over. No one was really explaining to me exactly what happened. So I just had so many questions. And then, you know, what happened next? I guess senior year comes along, and I was panicking because I'm like, do I even have what I need to graduate? Like, am I on track? What's going on? Just like completely panicking. And then when it comes to my spring semester of my senior year, COVID happens. So at this point, I'm like, I don't even know what my life is. Mind you guys, this is probably something I should have mentioned earlier. When I talked about experiencing church hurt in my last episode, I mean, growing up, there was so much church hurt, just so much judgment, so much church hurt. But especially when I was in college, I struggled so hard with finding the right community. And I remember there was one semester, I want to say it was junior year too, where I came home after, you know, finding out that the house was gone, went back to school, and I started feeling the Lord tell me, like, Aduré, it's time, like, you have to go to a different church. But I was like, why would I do that? Like, no way. But I knew why God was telling me to do it, because I wasn't growing. I wasn't learning anything. Like, I definitely felt like I was becoming stagnant in my faith. And I was like, no, God, like, as long as these 3 people are here, my closest friends, I have no reason to leave. And God was quick with it, let me tell you. Those 3 people that I said, like, God, as long as they're here, I'm not leaving, all 3 of them stopped being my friend. Almost like instantly, like at the same time. It actually was insane, but it was so chaotic. It was so crazy. I remember the college pastor pulled me into his office one time, and he was like, hey, people are talking that, you know, they're saying that you're thinking about leaving. Like, it just became such a thing. And I somehow became like the topic of gossip or conversation. And I'm like, I'm just trying to be a faithful steward. I'm trying to just follow the Lord. I don't know what I'm doing. How is this happening to me? And so I was just so depressed. I mean, literally having to drop out of school and then having so much going on at home. And then now, like, just feeling like I don't fit in to this church that I loved so much. Like, I just felt like, okay, I just have to leave, because clearly I'm not wanted here anymore. And no shade to those people at all. Like, still love them for sure. But it just was like, clearly God is telling me I have to leave. So yeah, by the time I get to senior year, I ended up going to this new church. I love that place. Shout out to Trinity, TYA. Those are my people. Those are still some of my close friends to this day. And I think they were so healing for me. They probably don't even realize how much they helped me go through or heal from. But those are my people. So anyways, senior year comes around, COVID happens, and I'm kind of panicking. I'm like, wait a second, what am I doing now? Like, what's next? I was supposed to be going to PA school, but everything I was doing, like, it had to be on pause. I couldn't shadow doctors anymore. I was like, where am I applying anymore? What am I doing? So I ended up taking a gap year, which also felt like the worst thing that could happen to me, but I'm actually glad I did it because I still got to spend another year in my college town, and I just got to really work on myself, which was great. But I think I just didn't know what I wanted anymore. I was like, I spent my whole 4 years trying to go to PA school, but now I'm like, if that's not an option anymore, then like, what am I doing? And so I ended up getting really close with the pastor's wife at that church at the time. And I remember she asked me to speak on a panel for this like women's conference. So I was like, okay, sure. And I just got really plugged in with the women ministry. And I think I ended up taking like a pharmacy tech class. Like that year was just the most random, did not know what I was doing year. So yeah, it was just such a random year. And so what's crazy is by the time January comes around, February comes around, I was just like scrolling on Instagram one day and I saw this ad pop up for this thing called the Passion Residency. And I was like, wait a second, Passion Conference, I go there every year. Like, I didn't realize it was a church. Like, what's going on? And so I looked into the Instagram, I looked on the website, and I saw that they had this program where you could work in the church for a year. And hey, hello, you get to move to Atlanta. So I was like, okay, at this point in my life, because I'm just at a point where every plan I ever had has completely fallen through. So at this point, I have nothing else to lose. So I was like, why not just apply? And so that night, I was up till like 2 a.m. I spent like 3 or 4 hours on this application. And right before I was about to submit it, a laptop dies. A laptop dies, you guys. So I'm like, okay, is this the Lord telling me to not apply? Or is this Satan trying to prevent me from applying? And so by God's grace, I just happened to turn my computer on and everything was still saved. Don't know how that happened. Literally, it was God, because I probably would not have turned in that application again. So I applied, and I kid you not, like maybe a month later, I actually was applying for something called the End It Movement, which is a company that's organization that's trying to stop sex trafficking, which if you watched my last episode, that was still to this day a dream job for me. And so I applied for that. I ended up interviewing with my first interview was with a woman named Jenny Brown, and she was the leader of the End It Movement at the time. And that interview went great. Loved her a lot. And then the next interview came along, and the next interview, and then next thing you know, I get to my last interview and they're like, hey, so we think you're great, but we're not actually going to give you the End It Movement position. They didn't tell me why at the time, I don't think. But they were like, hey, we still think you're great, and we would love for you to consider the experience team. And I was like, what's that? And they were like, it's basically like, we think you're a very social person. We think you obviously really love the Lord. This team is basically what helps run the church. And I don't think I really understood, if I'm very honest, at the time what the role was. But it sounded fun. And he was like, you're very happy and go lucky. And this is a very open position where you're, in front of people all the time. So we think you'd be great at it. I ended up interviewing with the pastor of that church location in Cumberland. And so then I got offered the position, and literally a month later ended up packing up my things and moving to Atlanta, Georgia, which is wild and crazy. I mean, looking back, I'm so grateful I did that, but I had no idea what was lying ahead of me. And so for those who don't know, I think I've said this before, maybe I haven't yet on this podcast, but I had no desire to work in a church. I think just because of the background I have with my mom and just how much time I spent in a church, that just seemed like not what I was supposed to do. Like, it just did not feel right for me. But again, I was just at a point in my life where I had no other options. And again, the job I was applying for was more of like a corporate role. It just happened to be in a church. So when they offered me the experience team, I was like, okay, well, this just kind of feels like the only door that's opening right now. And so I think I should go for it. And hey, I was excited to be in a new city too. So I'm like, what can I lose at this point? So pack up my things. I moved to Atlanta. The best way I can describe my first year living in Atlanta, it felt like I was on this runner's high. My first month, I was making so many friends. I had this new job. I was in this new city. I was living my best life. It just felt like I was on this runner's high of like everything's amazing because I just am so glad I'm out of Texas finally. Next thing you know, I want to say this is maybe a month in. Yeah, so maybe by the time we're in like July, I moved in May of 2021. So by the time the job started on June 1st, by the time we're in like mid-July, I felt like I hit a complete wall. And I'm talking brick wall, I'm talking cement wall, I'm talking any wall that you can physically think of. I hit a wall. And what I mean by that when I say that is it felt like I was being hit with just everything in life at the same time. Like I ended up getting COVID from this like camp that we went to. And I wasn't enjoying the role. Or I think I was trying to convince myself I was enjoying the role. But again, this is coming from a girl who kind of always knew she didn't want to work in the church, but was trying to be optimistic about it and was just excited for a new opportunity. I was like, this is the Lord. Passion. I mean, I've gone to conference every year. Like, this has to be the Lord. And it was just like I was crying all the time, which like probably isn't surprising because, like I said, I cried so much as a kid, but I just felt like God made a mistake. Like I felt like I was not wanted. And I guess this is what's hard about when it comes to, other people's stories too. This isn't about anyone else. This is just strictly about me and my walk with the Lord. I just was so depressed. It's not even funny. I'm so grateful I was able to find a therapist. Shout out to Julie. Love that woman. But yeah, honestly, the problem was no one really explained to me what spiritual warfare was, because that is exactly what I walked through that year. I can't even explain to you the details of what I experienced this year. For those who don't know, which will probably be everyone because it's the first time I'm saying this publicly, but I every year have had demonic dreams. And it always comes around the same time of the year. It's always around like September, October-ish. It started when I was maybe 17, 18, like around my parents' split. And it's just kind of always been a norm in my life, which is unfortunate. Or it was a norm. It's not anymore. We're speaking against that in Jesus' name. It's not anymore. But yeah, this year, the first year I lived in Atlanta, I experienced the demonic dreams tenfold more than I'd ever experienced them in the past. I was getting nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. I'd have dreams of like demons coming out of my ceiling, like could not sleep. Mind you, we were barely getting paid. So like, it's a miracle we were even able to pay our rent. Like, I don't even know. I just was struggling so hard. It's not even funny, but I was trying to be so optimistic with anyone from home when I talk to them, because I don't want them to think that this was just the worst decision, especially with my parents. My dad it took so much to convince my parents to let me move away from home. So I just was trying to convince everyone, including myself, that this was not a mistake, even though in my heart I was like, everything's going wrong. Like everything's going wrong. I think my boss hates me. I'm not getting any sleep. I just got so ill from having COVID. Like, this just doesn't feel like, maybe I think I made a mistake. I think God made a mistake. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. But mind you, I'm locked in for a year. Okay. It's a year-long contract. So I'm like, okay, God, while I'm here, you have to just teach me whatever it is you want me to know, because I can't go back home. To me, the biggest failure was packing up my things and moving back to Dallas. So I was like, I can't go home. I just can't. So that literally went on for an entire year. I remember calling every time my parents called, every time my friends called, I would tell them, guys, I'm having the best time. I'm learning so much. This is the best year ever. But in reality, I was constantly taking bathroom breaks to cry in the bathroom, or I would just like, I don't know, walk around the building and just like try to do with my time and not just prevent myself from crying. I was just a wreck. Shout out to Sydney Keller, though, because the second that my friend Sydney Keller got hired, I felt like there was a guardian angel in my presence. Like every lunch break that we would have, she would eat lunch with me. And she would just give me so much encouragement and remind me that like there is purpose in the season, even if I don't feel it. And I think I just struggled so hard with community too, because again, if you guys remember from the last episode, I was just so reckless with my vulnerability, but I just thought everyone was my friend. So I think I was just very, very naive, and hence me being betrayed so many times. But anyway, I don't want to like really harp on that year anymore. I'm grateful for it, actually. I think it taught me a lot about myself and about my walk with the Lord. And I actually think God was breaking down what I believed. Like, I think he was just giving me a clean slate for my faith to build upon. Like, he was helping me build a fresh new foundation, because everything my faith was built on was not actually Jesus. So I think he used that year to like just have a clean slate and just get back to the bare bones of like, why am I even following God to begin with? Because it literally got to that point where I was like, I'm not hearing God correctly, clearly, because this year was a fluke. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, does God even exist? Like, I was spiraling. No one even understands. I thought I was like low-key suicidal. I hesitate to say that because I don't take that lightly. Like, obviously, people, that is a very, very real thing. And I don't think I ever would have acted on it. But it just got very, very dark, okay, for a very long time. And so anyway, at the end of the year, they make decisions and let you know whether or not they want to keep you on as a full-time employee. I was like, okay, clearly after everything I've been through, there has to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Like maybe this is just God teaching me that, you know, good things come with time. Good things come with hard work. You know, maybe there's a lesson in this. I get to the end of the year, don't get offered the job, which it's so funny actually looking back. Sorry, it's not funny, but it's funny looking back because I'm like, I didn't even want it. You know what I mean? Like I struggled so hard, and that wasn't even the job I applied for. I was just trying to be faithful and like be a good steward. But like it wrecked me. I was like, guys, I'm going to have to move back to Dallas. Like that was the one fear I had, was like, I'm a failure. Like I failed. And I remember calling my siblings. That's the worst, you guys, having to call your family and your siblings and tell them like, guys, I don't know why I did this. Clearly this was a mistake. I'm coming home. And that was tough. But I want to say, this is what's crazy. This is how good God is. I want to say maybe a couple days after I found out I didn't get the job, my mom calls me and she's like, Aduré, there's this prophet in Africa who found me and he wants to talk to you. And I was like, what do you mean he wants to talk to me? And she was like, yeah, he's on the other line. Like, just pick up the phone. And I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, like let him through, I guess. And this man, I have never, to this day, I still have never met him, but God bless him wherever he's at, because he really was also a guardian angel that was sent to me to keep me going, because he called me and just spoke so much life over me. He'd never met me before in his life, but he said that he felt like he knew me because he could feel my spirit so clearly in the spirit, I guess. And so one thing he said is, you're sitting in your room and you're thinking that this year was a failure, but in reality, God called you to Atlanta on purpose, and what you're doing is pleasing to God. Already I'm a wreck. Like, literally start boohoo crying, because I'm like, that's just all I care about, was I want to be pleasing to the Lord, but I feel like I'm doing everything wrong, and like I made a mistake. And so him saying that I was pleasing God, like, literally just had me in puddles already. And then he said, you're not meant to move back to Dallas. And it's so crazy, you guys, because I was literally looking up places to live in Dallas. Like, my dad was even sending me apartments in Dallas. Like, I was so convinced, like, I'm moving back home. And he was like, you're not meant to move back to Dallas, because the second that you do that, someone's going to call you and say that, hey, I told you so. That was never going to work out for you. You never should have done it. And so he said, apply for jobs in Atlanta. He said, you're meant to be in Atlanta. And he said, I see you calling your mom, telling her that, Mom, it's happened. The job has come. I'm gonna finally be able to stay in Atlanta. He said it's so many other things on top of that. I still have the note card. I think at first I just wasn't, my faith was so broken at the time that I didn't even care to write anything down. But I think I ended up like grabbing an envelope and writing it on the back of an envelope because it was right after my birthday. And so I just wrote this on the back of a birthday envelope, but I still have it. And so, yeah, we'll always cherish that. But yeah, he said so many encouraging things and just reminded me that like, hey, don't let this year dim your light because there's still purpose in it, essentially. And so he said, go apply for other jobs. And so for the next 6 weeks, I was still having to like finish out my contract. So I was still showing up to this job every day, even though I knew I wasn't wanted and I knew I didn't get the job and was still depressed and still like finding time to go to therapy. But I still did it and I still tried to be faithful and serve this community. And what's crazy is I was having to I was having to leave the office during certain times. So during lunch or after work, I was just finding any pockets of time that I could to go interview places. So sometimes I would just like take my laptop and go work downstairs because I'd have an interview. And I would say that would be the most stressful thing about that 6-week period was having to like find a job while I was still working a job in 6 weeks. And there's so much pressure because I didn't know where I was going to move, but I needed to have a job before I signed another lease. And so it was insane. That was the most insane 6 weeks of my life. And so ended up getting the job. God is truly God of the midnight hour because I got this job offer, I think maybe on my last week working there, signed the papers, signed, sealed, and delivered, all the things. So got to stay in got to stay in Atlanta, praise the Lord. And then I feel like the journey really started because I ended up getting a new job as an event planner and I loved it. I think I had lost a lot of my confidence from the previous job. So in this new job, I didn't have a boss and I was really the entire events team. I didn't have anyone to help me do the events. So yeah, I just like literally hopped in. I had an event within like the first month of me being on the job and it was quite a whirlwind, but I'm telling you, I like slowly but surely started getting my confidence back. And after my first event, like it went so well. And yeah, so long story short, I ended up leaving that job by the end of that year because I had a very similar situation, not a great boss, very detrimental to my mental health. She was just cruel to me. And so I ended up applying, same thing. Within a month, I was applying for another job while also like still having the job I had. And then January came, January 2023, and I ended up getting the job at World 50, which is where I work now, which is insane. But it's been such a beautiful journey of just redemption since then. When I was working at Passion, I was still planning on attending that church after, but I felt, again, the same prophet, he called me and he was like, you have to make the decision that you don't want to make. And once you make it, you will please the Lord. So I knew he didn't say detail, like he didn't say exactly what I had to do, but I knew from what he was saying, like the hard decision for me is going to have to be to leave this church, which looking back, I think it was hard because I just didn't know anything else. My whole Atlanta life was that church because that was all I knew. So it felt scary to have to step out in faith again, but I did it and I'm so glad I did it. And I ended up stumbling upon this church called Free Chapel Midtown, which love those people. I cannot say it enough. Adore that church. So redemptive to me. I cried every Sunday in the back, just like weeping during worship, weeping during the sermons. There's a song that they sang. Oh, I think it was Defender. I think that's what it was called. And it was the bridge where it said, when I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You were the defender of my heart. And I was just, guys, a wreck. I was a wreck. And I just knew in my gut and my spirit, like, this is my new church home. So I ended up staying there for 2 years. And once I moved to Midtown, that was such a fun season to just like be able to walk to my church every Sunday. And I still live down the street from them. Shout out to Free Chapel. And now I'm in a season where I just know that it's time. Like, I know I'm moving soon. I'm going to be living in a new apartment within the next like 2 months. And I think it just feels right, because I ended up leaving Free Chapel, which was such a hard decision to make as well. But same thing, like, I just knew God was saying, like, it's time, like, you have to step away. And that's kind of just picking up where I'm at right now. I have literally no idea what I'm doing, you guys. I quite literally every day of my life is just stepping out in faith. Have no idea where my church home is going to be. I have no idea where I'm going to be living. I have no idea what I'm doing. But that's kind of the fun part about walking with the Lord, is just like, it's just kind of a surprise. Like, he already knows how it's going to pan out. So it's more a surprise for me. But that's why with me telling this testimony, like, that, to answer the question that my friend originally asked me was like, what is the difference between your walk with the Lord when you're a kid versus now? Stepping out, moving out to Atlanta on my own, having no one to depend on out here except Jesus. Like, he went from being just this random guy I prayed to now I know him as my friend. And I'm not even just saying that in a cheesy way, as corny as that may sound. He is my best friend. I'm like getting emotional just thinking about, like, I gave up on myself. This is way too early in the season to be crying. But when I tell you guys, like, I had literally no idea what I was doing with my life. Like, still have no idea what I'm doing with my life. Gosh, so sorry. I'm such a crier. But I like get emotional thinking about it. Like, I gave up on myself, and everyone else I feel like gave up on me. And there was Jesus the whole time saying, like, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You didn't make a mistake with moving. I was in such an isolated place after I left that residency position, and I just didn't know, like, I didn't have any friends. I didn't have a church. I had so much baggage. I had so much church hurt. I had no idea what I was doing with my life. But the entire time, even when I tried to push Jesus away because I was so angry that I felt like I kind of blamed him for everything. But even when I didn't know what I was doing and I pushed him away, he was just always there. He was always there. So anyway, that's why I think in the season when I have no idea where I'm about to move in 2 months, that's why I have so much peace, because if he did it for me before, like, he'll do it for me again. And there's a reason why he's constantly saying in the Bible that he's the God of Moses, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. Like, his reputation precedes him. He literally is showing you his resume. Like, look how faithful he was with Moses. Look how faithful he was with Abraham. Like, the whole Bible is quite literally just the biggest love story of how Jesus is constantly pursuing us, how God is constantly going after us. So I say all this to say, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be. I have no idea what I'm doing. Listen, I cannot explain to you enough how much I relate to that. You are just going to be so hurt in this world. Like, that is just the reality of it. You will be hurt by your friends. You will be hurt by your family. You will be hurt by so many people in your life. But Jesus is the one person who is incapable of hurting you. So that's why I'm always saying, like, I don't understand how people get through this life without God, because that's the only peace of mind I have. He is my sanity. He is my peace. He is my joy. He is, like, everything I am is him. Like, I'm nothing without him. I'm nothing. Do you hear me? So anyway, I saw this to say, like, I think that's something that when I look back on my story, my favorite part of my story is just knowing that in all the times when I thought everything's falling apart, Jesus was there the entire time. And even the moments where I was like, this is a mistake. This is awful. I have no idea what I'm doing. It was actually happening exactly how it was meant to happen. Like, that's what's insane. And I know that's also why I have so much peace right now, because even if it feels like things are crazy and wonky and chaotic sometimes, like, it's never a surprise with the Lord. Like, Jesus is always, he's always there, you know? And so every year I keep a note page on my phone, and I just call it, like, I title it the year, and then I say things that I'm learning. So for 2024, I titled it 2024 Things That I'm Learning, and my word for 2024 has been double portion. So anytime things come in twos this year, I just feel like that's the Lord, like, shining down on me. I think the biggest thing I've learned in the past 3 years, almost 4 years of being out here, I have learned how to measure my days. I have learned that, like, no matter how dramatic something might feel in the moment, it will not last forever. That's always the best piece of advice I've ever been given. Was my mom, this was years ago, she told me to buy a watch, and she was like, anytime that you're stuck in a situation where you feel like it's never going to end, buy a watch. If you don't have a watch, find a clock and just look at the arm that's constantly moving or ticking, and it will be a physical indication to you that time is always passing by. You will never be in that situation forever, whether it's a great situation or whether it's not. It's always going to pass. And so that's something I think I've learned in this 3, almost 4 years of living out in Atlanta, is just like, God, teach me how to measure my days, because I never want to be so just like head down in my life that I miss you or I forget about you. Like, the most successful things in this world will never be successful to me if I don't have Jesus. So anyway, I say all that to say it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey. And even now, like, it feels like a mountaintop, quote unquote, compared to where I've been. Like, I've seen God redeem. Like, I know him to be a redeemer, and I know him to be a restorer, and he's restored so much of the pain and so much of the shame that I've experienced in the past. Like, literally, my parents, they renewed their vows back in May, which was like such a testimony. And I had so many people blowing me up on Instagram, and they were like, Aduré, your parents have given me faith to keep praying for my parents, because they were in the same situation and they almost gave up on their parents. But literally looking at my parents, they're like, if God can do it for you, like, God can do it for me. And I'm just like, if you were to tell me that my parents would be encouraging for anyone's marriage, like, I would have thought you were crazy. But that's just what God does. Like, he redeems and he restores. And if something's broken, it doesn't have to stay broken. Like, he can mend it. And so anyway, I am sorry this was so long. I promise you every other episode after this will not be nearly this long. But I just wanted to be clear that, again, these 2 episodes, I did talk a lot about myself, just to like set up the foundation of just like who I am and why I'm doing this. The only thing that has gotten me through is Jesus and is his word. And people you can't know God until you just read his word for yourself. And so every episode is going to be just me getting into the nitty gritty of like, this is where I'm at right now in my walk. This is what I'm learning. This is what God's teaching me. And I'll be honest about like where I'm at, but that's just the whole purpose of this. So I want this to be real and authentic. And like, I think we just have too many people that care about like the aesthetics of things. And I just don't want that to ever overshadow like the heart of the podcast. And yeah, that's why we're here. So anyway, again, no pressure to like or subscribe. I'll never tell you to do that. Just do what you want and come back if you want, but I'll be here. So next episode, we'll probably have a guest episode next week. And so I'm excited for y'all to hear that. But thank you guys for watching this week, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.